Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Wellness Wednesday, and I want to welcome Dr. Tom O'Brien. Dr. O'Brien, how are you today?
Oh, very well. It's a pleasure to be with you.
The pleasure is mine. Now, you're here as my special guest on the Wellness Wednesday because you are an expert on autoimmunity, fatigue, and all things related to wheat. You are coming up with a special event. Would you tell my viewing audience what you're doing very soon? Is this
Yes, we're doing it's actually structured as a workshop. The format is interviewing a number of experts, quite a few, and playing those interviews. But every day, my co-host and I are going to be on Facebook answering questions about the topics of that day. And we'll stay on as long as people are asking questions. So it's more interactive. You know, my experience of summits like yours is that there's so much valuable information, but after a while, they're overwhelmed by so much information and they don't know how to take it in. And so our thought was to put put some pedal to the metal, if you will, so people can really wrestle with some of the concepts that they'll be hearing from world experts and ask their questions and get more clarity.
when I post about autoimmunity, I get something like 600 little threads because people are so concerned. So, in
Yes.
your estimation, why is autoimmunity such a hidden epidemic? It's probably not even hidden anymore. Why is it such an epidemic in 2021? What are some of the
Well,
underlying causes you're going
the,
to be dealing and
the,
diving into?
right. The first thing people need to understand is that when you get a diagnosis, you just didn't get an autoimmune disease that has been developing for 7, 10, 15 years, but hadn't killed off enough cells yet so that the symptoms were obvious. And as we lose more cells, we lose function, whether it's your thyroid and you get Hashimoto's thyroid disease, or your joints and you get rheumatoid arthritis, or your skin and you get psoriasis, or your brain and you get Alzheimer's. The concept is that there's something going on for many, many years that doesn't make people sick. So they don't know it's going on. That's the most important concept to understand, because once you understand that concept, then you understand the topic of biomarkers, meaning indicators that will show the direction your health is going before you've gone down the rabbit hole and you're diagnosed with a disease. So as you learn about biomarkers, you then want to know, okay, so how do I check my biomarkers? And some of them are so simple, and some of them are blood tests, but there are just so many of them, people just don't know. And so our first message is autoimmunity is a decades long process. And we'll talk about all the science. We've got the experts. I read their research papers, so I knew who to ask the questions to. And it's just going to make sense why your mother got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and how many years beforehand there was actually a problem that she really didn't know. And maybe she was just tired, and eventually there were so many cells damaged by the autoimmune mechanism. Eventually, she got enough symptoms that she got diagnosed with a disease. So
You-
that's the first concept.
And do you think that virus plays a role in so much of this autoimmune disease? My good friend Anthony William, the medical medium, is very big on the Epstein-Barr virus. Do you find that a big underlying biomarker?
We check viruses, and Epstein-Barr comes up often, but so does cytomegalovirus, so does herpes. There are 3 different herpes we check, and many of them come up on most people. That I'm really just learning about viruses. I thought I knew something about viruses, but what I just learned a couple of months ago, new paper came out, just shocked me. Many of us have heard that we have more bacteria in our bodies than we do human cells.
Right.
And it's about 10 times more cells of bacteria than human cells. And my mentor, Dr. Jeffrey Bland, the founder of functional medicine,
Yes.
in this interview that you'll see, he tells us that, Tom, if you take a teaspoon of stool, just 1 teaspoon, there's more bacteria in that teaspoon than all the stars in the known universe.
Oh my goodness.
And it's like, what? What? I mean, it just expands your understanding so much. Now, what I just read recently is that there are 10 times more viruses in the body than bacteria. Million
Let me listen to say that again. 10 times more viruses than
viruses.
even bacteria. So there are umpteen trillions, quadrillions of viruses floating around somewhere. So it's
That's exactly right. And viruses aren't bad for you. Bad viruses are bad for you.
right.
Just like bacteria is not bad for you. There are friends. We wouldn't survive without bacteria.
But
Bad bacteria is bad.
pathogenic bacteria is bad for you.
Right. Right. So the goal is to always have the diversity of the microbiome so you have enough of the good guys and so many different families of the good guys that they keep the bad guys in check. There's always going to be bad guys.
Right.
There's always going to be bad viruses. There's always. But the idea is to keep the good guys so strong and virile that the bad guys don't have a chance to take over and to rear their ugly head.
Exactly. But so this is a physical biomarker. What about the concept of trauma? You and I chatted about that, and it took off like a virus. It became viral. So my point is, with all this, could there be a traumatic incident that somehow rears its ugly head and weakens the immune system? Is it just physical? Could it be psychological, emotional, spiritual?
In my most recent book called You Can Fix Your Brain, it's #1 in 7 categories on Amazon for brain and nervous system function. It's a really good book. But I talk about there are 4 different platforms that we have to look at whenever you're diagnosed with a disease. You have to look at all 4 platforms because they're all contributing to some degree, some more than another. The platforms are structure, which is the home of chiropractic and massage and exercise and bones and muscles. Any disease can have a structural problem as the main contributor to it. That's why there's so many miracles in the field of chiropractic, because sometimes that makes the difference.
Because structure can equal function.
Exactly. The second one is biochemistry. And that's one we mostly focus on, which is the food we eat, the drugs, the vitamins, the air we breathe, the water, the biochemistry of our bodies. It's important, but it's only one of 4. The third one is the psychological or the spiritual or the emotional, which sometimes is the primary trigger to your rheumatoid arthritis. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it can be, or to your psoriasis, to any autoimmune disease. The emotional trauma that we store inside of us can be like a festering wound that's been covered up on a Band-Aid and you can't see it. And the fourth one is the electromagnetics. And in our world today, we've never been exposed to as much electromagnetic pollution. So all 4 of these are important. And to your question about the trauma, about the emotional or spiritual, absolutely. There are so many studies, and my joy is working with people who say things like, I've been to Mayo Clinic and they don't know what's wrong.
Oh.
And I'll say, that's great.
Because I'll find out.
Me, kind of straight. I said, that means you don't have a disease. If you had a disease, Mayo Clinic would find it. You've got dysfunction. Something's not functioning right. So let's look at the 4 platforms of health: structure, biochemistry, emotional, spiritual, electromagnetic. Let's see what combination of all this got thrown into your pot of soup and came up with this taste that you've got right now that's called an autoimmune disease.
So for your summit, what did you learn that was a real, almost unbelievable aha moment for you when it came to structure? Let's take each of those platforms. Was there anything that anybody revealed to you that you didn't know? Because you who know so much, you've been in the field for 30, 35 years. You're well known all over the country, all over the world. What was new to you? And that's why people should tune into the summit, by the way, because of all the new revealing information and cutting edge material that you're bringing out. So what was new? Give them a little carrot.
You bet. So actually, I opened my practice 42 years ago. in
Oh
a
my
suburb of
gosh.
Chicago. For you and I are the same age, or very close to the same age.
How old are you? I wear my age like a badge of honor. How old are you, Dr. Tom?
I'll be 70 in a couple of months.
You're a kid.
I'm a kid. Okay, okay, good, good. So, in terms of structure, probably what dropped my jaw more than anything else were the interviews on exercises for your vagus nerve. And when you
Ooh.
do physical exercises for that master nerve that goes from the brain all the way down to the gut and carries so many messages from the gut up to the brain, that when you do exercises to exercise your vagal nerve, you change brain function. And I'm
Ooh.
talking about things like gargling, singing in the shower, these silly little things that we wouldn't think, but you're exercising the muscles that massage the nerves, that get more lymphatics to drain the area around the nerves. And the result is you get better vagal function. And the
And
vagus nerve controls your heart rate, it controls your gut function, the motility of your gut. So the idea of exercises for the vagal nerve was jaw dropping to me.
how long do you have to gargle for? I'm going to take this little biohack and do it immediately. How long do you gargle for?
You start with 15 seconds because that's a lot for some people. Their muscles are not very strong to do this. So you just start for 15 seconds, and the goal is work up to between a minute to 2 minutes of just in the shower, and I do it, I'm massaging my hair and
I
I don't want to do it now, but it's, you just, and sometimes I'll just stand there in the shower with some hot water on my back, and I'll be gargling. And there's an exercise for your adrenal glands, a physical exercise. It's called hot, cold, hot.
Oh, I
You let
love it.
hot water beat down on the back, mid-low back area, where the kidneys are, because that's where the adrenal glands are, on top of the kidneys. So you start with hot, and you reach behind, and you turn it all the way to cold for 5 seconds, and then you turn it back to hot. Hot opens up the blood vessels, lets more blood and lymphatics flow into the adrenal glands and the kidneys. Cold shuts it down. Hot opens it up again. And so you start with hot and you end with hot. And what I'm trying to do now is gargle when I'm doing that. And what usually happens is when I turn the cold on, like, and I spit the water out, right? And I just start laughing. So you just practice. You practice these things, and eventually you get the hang of it. You're doing all these silly little things.
Sure, and it becomes part of your everyday routine.
That's right.
That's an aha moment. I'll have you share just a couple more because I don't want you to scoop when is this going to be, by the way, this wonderful summit?
Next week. Next week.
Give me the dates, please.
June, oh no, it's tomorrow. June 8th, I think, through the 14th.
June 8th is tomorrow, my friend.
Yes, it starts tomorrow.
Oh my gosh, it starts tomorrow. We're going to have to put something up even before this goes live. Okay. You're going to have to give us all the links, all the material, all the
I'm
swipes
sure
and
my
so forth.
team has done that. Or I'm like you. I have no idea where the links are, but I'm sure my team has sent them over to your team.
Your people have sent them to my people. That's
That's right.
wonderful.
That's right.
Okay, so how do we know we have a childhood trauma? That's my question to you. How do you know that there's something in your childhood that's traumatized you and made you unwell?
A really good question. When you take a moment to reflect your actions of the day and you say, I really didn't have to be that ... with that person. I didn't have to be that cold, or I didn't have to be that mean, or why did I blurt out so much stuff I didn't mean to, with whatever. But when you look back and you identify there's some actions that when you reflect on them, it's not really the way you would have liked to have done it. And when you have things like that, you're becoming more conscious of your inner dynamic, meaning something had its hands on the steering wheel of how it makes you react instead of respond. That's really the key, I think. A reaction is like a knee-jerk reaction that you do. It's an automatic defense mechanism. That's a reaction. A response is when you evaluate and consciously make a choice of what to say or what to
Interesting.
do. So
Interesting.
when you
Interesting.
find that you are reacting and you really would have preferred to respond differently, that may be a suggestive indicator, a biomarker. There's some history back in here somewhere that's not conscious, because if
Yes.
it were conscious, you'd fix it.
Yes.
So it's not conscious. And then that may be an indicator to do a little work to kind of probe in there and see what's cooking in there. What's got you so hot?
So do you still see patients? Do you do telemedicine long distance?
That's correct.
So do you have the ability, the intuition? I know you have the passion, certainly, and the knowledge and the brilliance, but do you have that little intuition to get a sense when you're with somebody that doesn't know how to extract whatever that trauma might be, to kind of lead them in the right direction, to shine a light on that area that's not brought to the light?
You know, Anne Louise, that's I think a gift that I personally have, is to guide a person in the direction of the four platforms. And you know, you might want to take a look over here. And we did an event where it was a weekend with me, and people flew in from all over the world. We limited it to 15 people. It sold out in 4 hours, and so we did it the second
Mm,
weekend.
mm.
And you know, people came from all over the world. It was really quite wonderful. And we did a half circle. And then in the front, I had two directors' chairs, and I was in one director chair. I had a billboard, you know, a blackboard, and I'm writing stuff all day. And we're just talking about health. And then, okay, who wants to be first? And the first person comes up, and I say, okay, so what's cooking for you? Well, I have MS. Okay.
Mm.
And what do you think is the missing link? I mean, you've been here now for 6 hours. We've been talking about this. What do you think is the missing link? Well, I didn't know about this, or this. Okay. Okay. And as we're talking through this, it becomes clear which one of the four pillars is likely where they need to put attention. And I have to say, out of the 28 people in those 2 weekends, 16 of them had unresolved trauma that
Oh,
was the base of what had to be dealt with. I mean, with some of these people, towards the end of the day or the second day, they come sit in the chair and they'd look at me and they'd start crying because they just realized what the trauma was. And we create a really safe place to say, you know, this is good. This is discharging. Let it come. It's okay. And I had a box of Kleenex, you know, and I mean, everyone is so sending loving energy, you know, to the person in the chair because they were in the chair already. So they know what this is like. And it was just,
I can imagine how purging and how cathartic that kind of thing is. How did you get to be where you're doing all this, Dr. Tom? Would you tell my audience a little bit about your background?
well, in my
How did you
first
get to
marriage,
be Dr. Tom?
well, uh, it's quite a journey. You know, I lived in a martial arts school in Japan in my 20s, and I was a deshi, which meant that I got to clean the toilets. But it was for the martial art of Aikido, and I lived with the Grand Master. It was such an honor to be there. And Aikido is about no fights, never, never. That if energy comes at you, you redirect the energy out of the way. You don't stand up like karate and block and fight. It's very different. And so that really molded me to think about physical in that way, which transferred over into emotional and spiritual quite often. And my first wife, I married again. I was married for 23 years. Lovely. I'm very grateful for the marriage and the children. My first wife is a Jungian analyst.
Oh,
And so the result of that was every day, you know, we were living with bringing up our consciousness a little bit more. And what was the motivation behind my saying that to that guy? You know, I saw my friend Steve today, and I really jumped all over him because he's not listening to what I'm suggesting for his health. You know, I talked to my wife about it, and she said, well, how come you jumped over? Because he's not listening. Well, why is it so important that people listen to you? Because I care, and we would just go into it and we would start to work with it. So, and I realized that I had a lot of unresolved trauma from growing up in Detroit. And it was not an easy early life. And I had a lot of buried trauma. So I had to work through all of that.
Yourself.
And when I was divorcing, I was in a store one day and I saw this book and it just called to me. And it was When Things Fall Apart by Pema Chodron. And I read that book and there was a term in there that just changed my life around. And I'm not sure I'll pronounce it correctly. Maitri, Maitri.
Is that Japanese?
Tibetan.
Oh, Tibetan.
And it means loving kindness and an unconditional friendship with yourself. Now, I read that and I said, I've never been friends with myself. I'm harder on myself than anyone else could ever be on me, right? And I realized that, and it just changed how I looked at life. And I started looking more to respond instead of react in life. And
But along the way, but what I don't understand is you're a chiropractor as well.
yes.
So how did that fit into all this? Is this?
Oh, it was just beautiful, because Aikido is about get out of the way. And when we lived in Ann Arbor, I was an undergrad at the University of Michigan. My hair was down to my waist and I had a beard, and my girlfriend had a history of having back problems and she'd have to be in the hospital for a week in traction because she was in a car accident when she was 11. And her back went out on her. And I called her orthopedic surgeon and the nurse said, doctor's not taking backs anymore. He's taking elbows and knees. And so I, this hotshot martial art guy said, okay, hold on a minute. Okay, I just broke her elbow. Can I bring her in now? I was just a little bit of a pisser with them.
Yes.
But then my friend said, I just took my wife to a chiropractor and he really helped her. And I said, what's a chiropractor? I didn't know. So we called this guy. I called him on the phone and he said, sure, bring her right in. And Dr. Harold Swanson was a 74-year-old, kind-hearted, slow-moving guy. But when he put his hands were like ham hocks. They were huge hands. He'd put his hands on you and all of a sudden you'd feel warm. And it was his energy, and he was
a real healer.
He was quite the healer. He was quite the healer. And he worked on my wife and she was able to stand up and walk. I had to carry her in. And I said, is she going to be okay? She's going to be okay? And he said, might take a day, might take two, but she'll be fine. And then he looked at me and he said, you come back, Tom. You come back and watch. Oh, okay, Dr. Swanson. So I'd go back every once in a while, knock on the door, go in. Tom, this is Kathy. Kathy, this is Tom. He's going to watch. And
Wow.
Kathy, and I'd say, hello. And then he would work on Kathy, he'd tell to me, say, Tom, Kathy has asthma. And she'd be lying on her stomach and he'd take my hands and say, feel here. And I would feel along the spine, both sides of the spine.
Huh.
You feel any difference? And I'd say, well, maybe this is a little stronger or harder than this side. Yes, it is. Now I'm going to adjust this because that area is where the nerves come out that go to her lungs.
Oh, how fascinating.
And then he'd make an adjustment and within a minute or two, oh, Dr. Swanson, I can breathe so much easier. And that was my introduction to chiropractic. And Dr. Swanson's philosophy, because he graduated in 1924, and there wasn't much science back then, his philosophy was, we have to get rid of the resistance. We have to let loose of the resistance so the energy can flow.
True in every area of life.
Aikido is about let the energy flow. And as you've just said, because you're a master, true in every aspect of life. So we have to let go of the resistance. See, when you have a disease, when you have an autoimmune disease, or if you have chronic fatigue, it's like you're trying to back out of the driveway and you're saying, what's wrong with this car? It's barely moving. It's the emergency brake. And you let go of the emergency brake and then you back up just fine. When you have a disease, there are emergency brakes holding back your life force.
Yes.
And they can be structural, biochemical, emotional, spiritual, or electromagnetic.
Excellent. So getting back to this wonderful summit, because we will have aired this on Wednesday, which is a day after the summit has actually aired. So I want people to know if they come into this a day or two late, that they have access to all the...
They have access to all of it. At the end, we'll do the whole thing again over the course of a weekend. We'll do all of it, all 6 days of it over the weekend. So you'll see, and what time. So if there's an episode you missed, you'll be able to catch it.
And tell us some of the friends of ours, our mutual friends, that are some of your keynote speakers, so my people can really mark their calendars. Who is going to be speaking? You'll be speaking.
I'll be speaking. My co-host, Dr. Evan Hirsch, will be speaking.
He's out in Washington, isn't he? Seattle?
I don't know where he is. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yes, he was the physician of one of my co-writers, and a very outstanding physician. Excellent.
Very knowledgeable guy.
Very knowledgeable.
Jeffrey Bland, Dr. Jeffrey Bland, the founder of functional medicine. Mark Hyman, my friend Mark Hyman. Many of the faculty of the Institute of Functional Medicine. I interviewed about 5 or 6 of them. We've got Joe Pizzorno, Dr. Joe Pizzorno, the founder of University.
So you've got heavy hitters, but I love the fact that you're going to be digging very deep and get some of these underlying causes that are not easily found.
That's exactly right. And what's different is every day you can come on Facebook, chat with us, and we'll answer your questions. Well, I heard Dr. Pizzorno talk about that apples are really toxic for you because they're the #1 fruit with chemicals, but I love apples. But that's only if they're not organic. But if you can't afford organic apples, you go to mygreenfills.com and you buy their vegetable wash, and you squirt a little in a little tub of water, and you dip your fruit and vegetables when you buy them in there, and it takes out 98% of all the chemicals that are on that fruit or vegetable.
So you've got all the biohacks,
Exactly.
So in other words, we're not just giving you the problem, we're giving you the solution. Tell my people once again the name of this wonderful summit.
Fatigue and autoimmunity.
And where can we find you? Is there a website? We'll post everything just in case.
We will give your team the links so that you can post them.
Excellent. I want to thank you so much, Dr. Tom. This has been most, and how shall I say this? Enlightening is the word I want to say. Enlightening and heartwarming. And I'm so happy for your passion and your expertise and your brilliance. I give thanks to you.
Thank you, Anna Louise. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be with you. You have carried so many torches for so many people for so many years. It's really an honor to work with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Goodbye, my friends. Shalom.